when you have to, deal with something of a serious nature, we just want to do it in the right sensitive manner.
Welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast presented by Hippo Direct. This is your place to hear from a new entrepreneur or innovator every single Wednesday morning who's turning wild ideas into wild growth. I'm your host, Max Branstetter, digital marketing dude at Hippo Direct, and you can reach me at max@hippodirect.com for help using your podcast as a marketing tool. This is episode number 73, shout out Joe Thomas, and today we have something really cool for you. Today's guest is Nathan Ross, and he is the award-winning executive producer of some of the biggest projects out there in the entertainment world. His works have won Oscars, they've won Emmys, they've won Golden Globes. He is the executive producer behind Big Little Lies, Sharp Objects, Dallas Buyers Club, Demolition, and Wild. And the cast he's pulled together is not too shabby either. I'm talking the A-list of the A-list, including Meryl Streep, Matthew McConaughey, Nicole Kidman, Jake Gyllenhaal, Reese Witherspoon, Amy Adams, Jared Leto, and many more talented actors and actresses. You'll hear how the magic happens and how to create content that draws an emotional response from your audience. Lights, camera, enjoy the show. Alrighty, we are here with Nathan Ross, the award-winning executive producer of some of the biggest projects out there, and my fellow brother at Sammy, shout out Sigma Zeta at Indiana University. How you doing today, Nathan?
I'm doing well, Max. Thanks for having me. Excited to dive in and discuss all things entertainment.
Of course, yes. It's who doesn't like things that are entertaining? So thanks for hopping on today. I know you have a crazy schedule, but we're going to dive into a lot about what you've done throughout your career and on the production side, and also some of your roots before that and how you stay creative and inspired. But first thing I'm dying to know is, when did you know that you were going to be a producer? Like, is that something you knew from when you were a child that you wanted to do?
What little I knew about producing always seemed to interest me, but not to take anything away from directing or writing or acting. I just didn't necessarily think I had the chops for that. But as a child and adolescent, I guess I was always into movies, music, and sports. And so my interests lied there. And when I realized I wasn't going to be a professional baseball player or a rock musician, it kind of got into that secondary field. And I had read some books in college, and then when I in law school, I took some entertainment and sports law classes. I had read a book about Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer called High Concept, I think, and that was it was an entertaining, salacious 1980s era of excess, but that I thought I could do that, having kind of Midwest Chicago values and common sense of business. But it kind of some of it fell into place, some of it was premeditated, I guess you'd say. But that's I'm sure we'll get into it further.
Right. So what's fascinating to me about your career, well, one of many things, is that you were really on the agency side beforehand, and you were an agent before you made the move into the production side. Yep. So what made you get your law degree and go the agency route to begin with?
Well, backing up, in undergrad at our famed Indiana University, go Hoosiers.
Yeah, go Hoosiers.
I had started in business, and then kind of bounced more into a pre-law situation because I was probably having a little too much fun in undergrad, and
that tends to happen.
Yeah. So when I graduated, I double majored and minored. I did a semester at Tel Aviv University. I was really interested in Middle East politics and the conflict out there, and did some traveling. And I was fortunate enough to get into a law school in Chicago called John Marshall, and they actually listed me of 12 alumni of notable success, and I guarantee you, of the 12, I had the lowest graduating GPA. So that just goes to show you can you can still do okay. But
well, congrats
for
on
me,
that. Congrats on the GPA and the accolades.
I don't know if it's something to be proud or extol out there, but that happened. So for me, going to law school I had two goals. I knew I wasn't going to practice. I knew I wanted to, again, get into something movies, music, or sports related. I didn't know what. My brain wasn't developed enough to have, an idea of what specifically. Like a lot of people in the entertainment industry who are 22, 23 coming out of USC or NYU know what they want to get into. And I respect that. And I didn't, but I just didn't, have that. Maybe it's because I was in Chicago and I wasn't, on the coasts, but it kind of evolved as time went on. But my goal in law school was to graduate and to pass the Illinois bar. And so thankfully I did both. And I was, reading books like The Mailroom and the book I mentioned earlier. In the back of my mind, I had an idea that I wanted to get to LA and give a shot. And what little I knew about the industry was that starting at a talent agency was the way to go. That the analogy is that's kind of the center spoke of the entire industry because of the amount of information and talent that is proliferated from from one source, because there's studios and production companies and management companies and the like, but agencies and the two or three really big management companies are kind of where it's at. So if you're going to get a graduate degree, so to speak, in the entertainment industry, starting at a talent agency is the way to go. And you start at the bottom rung. There's a lot of nepotism in Hollywood, but even if you still start as an assistant or in the mailroom. And so after I passed the bar, I stayed in Chicago a few years and started a mortgage brokerage, which at the time was a successful kind of sector of business to be in the late 90s with the refinance boom and all that, until it kind of came crumbling down, as we all know. And so I started a company with a couple buddies, and actually the company was called Sigma Mortgage Corporation, which, as you probably can surmise, Max, is named after our fraternity.
Oh yeah, that just clicked. That's awesome.
And so the two of us, my two partners and I all were Sammys at IU. So I knew that my heart wasn't going to be in that long term, but it was a way for us to make some money and have some fun, in our mid-20s. I coached some high school football, and then eventually extricated my way out of the mortgage business and moved to LA at 28, and not knowing anybody was able to get a job at one of the major agencies at the time called ICM, where I ended up being for 9 years. And getting the job was as strange as I had saved up some money to buy a condo in Westwood, and my realtor took a liking to me, and we're good friends to this day. And she was the first person I met in LA, and she liked me. And she, as you might assume in any kind of walk of life or any business, it's your connections and the people you meet and relationship driven kind of stuff. And so she introduced me to an agent in the finance division of ICM who liked me when I went to go sit with him. And he told me, hey, try to skip the mailroom, get on a desk, meaning, start just becoming an assistant for an agent. And one of the senior agents and not just at the agency, but in the whole business in terms of filmmakers and screenwriters was a guy named Robert Newman. And I interviewed with him, and he took me on as his second or junior assistant. And that was my first job in the business. So I was able to skip the mailroom, which I guess has its pros and cons. But if you want to start like earning overtime right away or get your kind of career going, skipping the mailroom is not the worst thing. So
yeah,
working for Robert for, I think, 2.25 years was getting another graduate degree basically. And so it was, that was an invaluable experience. And then from there, I through lobbying and kind of internal politics and this and that, which we won't get into, I was able to get promoted and became an agent. So while you're kind of going through your experience as an assistant, not everyone wants to become an agent. Some people want to get their entertainment experience and then move on to do different things. It can be as a manager, it can be as an agent, like I said, it could be at a production company, it could be at a studio. You can just go off and become an independent producer. You could be a writer, an actor, a director, anything. And so, but I think having the law degree and the business background and the love for film, being an agent is kind of works and covers all angles and checks a lot of boxes, and it was something that I had a liking to. And so so I was at ICM for 9 years and repping writers and directors and going to film festivals and movie premieres, and it was a great life, and one I wouldn't trade for. But I segued to producing at a certain moment, which I'm sure we'll get into on this chat.
Right.
But it was it was a good experience once it started feeling like a job, which it kind of did toward the end, like in 2000. It was like after the Writers Guild strike in 2008. I had signed a 2-year deal, and the agency was going in a bit of a different direction. And so it was, for me, the writing was on the wall to maybe it's time to find and do something else. And that kind of segued to getting the script for Dallas Buyers Club in, and kind of, deciding I wanted to try to control my own destiny, and teaming up with my now, filmmaking partner, Jean-Marc Vallée. And so, and that's what we've been doing since then.
Yeah. And you've been up to quite a heavy amount of things there. I think the key lesson in all of that is just to always be looking for a new place to live, because you never know who your realtor is going to know, because that's what started your career. I want to segue, as you so eloquently said, I want to segue into the production side of things, because you have now been the executive producer on some of the biggest projects out there. I mean, namely, recently at the time of this recording, Big Little Lies, Sharp Objects, Wild, Dallas Buyers Club, Demolition. The list goes on and on. I know you've got a lot you're working on as well that we probably can't talk about. But I think the production side of things is really, really interesting. And when you think about films and series and the entertainment world from a business sense, you're really like a serial entrepreneur when you look at your role with each different project you do, and being the executive producer on that. So I'm curious for you, like, where do you think you specialize? There's so many different parts of producing, whether it be the marketing side, whether it be getting the talent together, whether it be the financial side of things. Mm-hmm. Where's your real passion, and where do you specialize there?
I think as you go through the years, in each project presents its own challenges. You kind of grow your strengths as you evolve as a producer. And so coming from the agency world, I guess if I had an asset, it would be my relationships with other people in the community, namely studios or financiers, or obviously other agents and managers and talents, namely writers, directors, actors. And so I kind of had that going for me, and having rep filmmakers and screenwriters, I had a good network of people I could speak to regarding material or ways to get to other people through those people. And, some finance background. I wouldn't say I specialized in, and it's, and it's kind of always evolving, but some models have stayed the same for better or worse. And then, I guess my biggest learning curve was the actual physical production of film and TV. So you really just learn that on set and in post and during development of screenplays and through the casting process. And so I think that one of my strengths is in casting, because I watch a ton of stuff and have a good instinct, I believe, and along with my partner, and we've been more right than wrong in terms of our projects. And then, along with casting, it would be material selection. And so that's, again, whether it's a book or a screenplay or a treatment or a format, meaning if there's, right now I'm looking at, I can't, say what it is, not that it's that big of a deal, but there's a...
Oh, okay. Now I'm jumping out of my seat. Now you're in trouble.
No, there's a French language TV show that's kind of in the vein of Mr. Robot that was sent to me, that I watched. That was very interesting, and we're contemplating getting involved on an English language remake of it. That could be maybe one day
that's cool.
on Netflix or Amazon, and it's so that's the sort of thing. So I think my strongest asset, and everyone has to have some version of your gut feeling, your instinct, that sort of thing, is identifying material or a good story, and then then talent, whether it's writer, director, actor, kind of being able to weed through that process, and then maybe to a lesser extent the finance and the production side of things. But on every show or movie, I try to as much as I can, kind of shadow people and see what they're doing and learning. And I would probably fail a test in terms of what certain, like what a gaffer does versus something else. So it's, but
Me as well.
there's other people for that, but I try
Right.
to. That's kind of in the process. But the cool thing about the business is that you're always learning and you're always evolving, and whether you're doing kind of going back to your earlier kind of statement or question, was there are smaller kind of character driven, you're doing a small indie film for the love of it, and then there are the bigger kind of, for us it was Big Little Lies was probably our broadest, most commercial endeavor thus far. But we don't set out and have a premeditated, I think we should do something broad and commercial now, that will reach more people, versus let's do something more arcane and intimate, like a Dallas Buyers Club, say. It really is. The cool thing about what we do is that it's organic and it evolves and it's story driven, and we don't care. When I say we, it's my partner Jean-Marc Vallée and I, a very talented Quebecois filmmaker who I was first his agent for when I saw his small French language indie film called Crazy, and at the 2005 Toronto Film Festival. And we teamed up in 2010 or so as a producer, filmmaker. And then we've gone on, this run that you touched on earlier, but we don't care what the medium is. We don't care what the format is. And we don't care if it's big or small. It's really just what's story driven and doesn't move us. And, and kind of what's the arc of the character. And so we look at it like that. And so from a money-making standpoint, maybe it'd be wiser to be involved in just big, high-concept film and TV projects. But we feel like, we've got, without getting into details, we're working on a small little indie right now called Girl Named Sue, which will be maybe a $7 million budget that we hope to shoot in the second quarter of next year with Shailene Woodley from Big Little Lies. And then, later in the year, we have our big film, which we're blessed to be undertaking, which is a movie about John Lennon and Yoko Ono and their love story that Yoko Ono is a producer on. And it's kind of the authorized John and Yoko story. And so that will undoubtedly, and that's for Universal Pictures. So it'll be theoretically a big budgeted awards, hopefully, knock on wood, fair project. So we just kind of go where the wind blows. But, I think that's kind of the deal with that.
Yeah. And you clearly have a knack and have good gut feelings, if you will, and a good sense for scoping out potential projects and turning them into real winners. Literally award winners there. I think the thing, when I look at your, I guess, IMDb, when I look at your resume there of past projects, I think one of the biggest things that jumps out at me is that, as you mentioned, the talent and the casting. These actors and actresses are like the A-list of the A-list. You've worked with Meryl Streep, Nicole Kidman, Reese Witherspoon, Jake Gyllenhaal, Matthew McConaughey. The list goes on and on and on. So what is it that has allowed you to position yourself to attract such top-notch talent? Because these are the biggest stars out there.
Well, the short answer is my partner, Jean-Marc Vallée.
There we go. We'll get him on for part two.
The longer answer is I think all artists, and as it relates to me, I use that term loosely, try to gravitate towards strong material. And so we've been fortunate in that regard. But my directing partner is known as an actor's director, and he keeps a very loose set where actors can really explore themselves. And I think word got out. And after Dallas Buyers Club, and the success that Matthew and Jared had in terms of winning all the awards, the word was out that Jean-Marc was the kind of filmmaker that actors would want to work with. So we've been fortunate to have that reputation, I think. And so that carried on with Reese and Laura Dern in Wild, and Jake and Naomi Watts in Demolition, and our very talented, newly nominated this morning for a SAG ensemble, the Big Little Lies cast. And then,
congrats on that,
of course, and and Amy Adams and her amazing cast on Sharp Objects. So yeah, that I guess that's that.
Yeah, so it's clearly it seems you and Jean-Marc have created some momentum. And then once the word gets out in Hollywood, I mean, that's a hell of a positive rumor and word to have going around. So that's really, really cool. And I think let's look at Big Little Lies for a second. I mean, how many shows can you name that have a cast with that much star power, if you will? What's it like when you're actually on set or when you're actually filming and producing this, when you have so many big names there at the same time? How do you make everything work together and make sure that everybody's pleased and happy with the result?
Everyone's kind of there with a positive energy, and without sounding cliche, the first season of Big Little Lies, it really felt like a family, and you don't get that with every single shoot you have. But Reese and Nicole, this was their project along with their producing partners and David Kelly, and they came to Jean-Marc and I, and then we got on the team, and then we cast the rest. And having the other women involved and the guys, it had a family feeling to it without sounding too corny. And
yeah,
but being able to sit on the set, like for instance in the second season, you have scenes with Nicole Kidman and Meryl Streep and Reese Witherspoon and Meryl Streep, and then and just you could all these Laura Dern and Zoe Kravitz and Shailene, and it's just it's, if you're into acting and actors, it's a masterclass every day. And there were certain days where, as a producer, you definitely, it was standing room only, and you wanted to be on set watching them work and their different takes and the courtroom scenes in the second season and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Was always very interesting. And then,
just a heads up, there is a spoiler coming up for Dallas Buyers Club. So if you don't want to hear it, skip ahead for 30 seconds.
With Matthew and Jared, when they had their massive weight loss and their scenes together, and we were shooting on a very low budget in New Orleans, in the surrounding area in 2012. Those were just some very memorable days. Jared's character dying in the hospital, I think, was right towards the end of the shoot, and there's just moments that you won't forget. So you just. The atmosphere that Jean-Marc and our team kind of creates and fosters and enables an actor to really kind of go there and explore themselves creatively. And more often than not, you get a little bit of magic, and that's kind of the goal on these shoots.
Yeah, we've created tons of magic there.
Mm.
I think another thing that sticks out is, in addition to the amazing cast and talent that you've worked with, you have a lot of variety in the projects that you decide to work on. But I think a lot of them do have that aspect of heavy drama, and they're serious issues and controversial issues that are at play there and are big parts of the plot. What's it like capturing, these different, whether it's crime, whether it's domestic abuse or murder or different crimes and or something like these are serious issues. How do you take something like that and make sure that you're putting it out there the right way, where it's part of the story and it's essential for the sake of entertainment, but it's also, not going to be something that offends a bunch of people?
That's a multi-part question. I mean, I guess there's, we want to, the truth is always our kind of our bottom line is we want to tell something as truthful as possible. And we lean towards dramatic, but that doesn't mean it can't be entertaining or have levity and comedic at times. By way of example, to your point, with Dallas Buyers Club, one of my little, here's your job, Mr. Producer, is I needed to learn as much as a non-doctor, non-medical professional layperson could about HIV and AIDS. And so I literally one day picked up the phone and called Cedars-Sinai Hospital and their infectious disease department and fostered a relationship with a doctor there who runs it, who was in New York during the 80s AIDS epidemic, and he and I built a great relationship and made him part of, thanked him in the credits and and all that. And we wanted the science to be right. We wanted to be accurate. The last thing we would want to do is offend anybody who was there and lived it and went through it. And to that end, we fostered a relationship with AMFAR, one of the bigger AIDS organizations, and just we just want to do things in a classy, accurate sort of way. And so that was, the first film that I was an active producer on. So that was, I guess, a good teaching point. And
Yeah.
it's something that we've tried to do, moving on with Big Little Lies. We had this last season, we had a legal expert in between David Kelly and this legal expert and myself, again, who barely graduated from law school. We wanted to make sure that the law aspects were accurately portrayed, and that sort of thing. But in general, in terms of tone, I think we just try to some of the aspects, like with Big Little Lies and the domestic violence, that we wanted to shine a light on that first season. That's those are, we again want to tell truthful, honest, compelling stories in an entertaining way, right? And so we just wanted to, when you have to deal with something of a serious nature, we just want to do it in the right, sensitive manner.
That's crazy. I mean, you really get into the details. I think that seems key, is what's helped you portray these challenging things so well, is that you actually do the real life research and talk to real doctors and real people involved in this kind of thing. So that's really neat that you take that extra level there. What would you say is the biggest challenge that you've ever come across as a producer?
I guess the only thing that's popping in my mind at the moment, well, there's two. One would be, we were in active prep on Wild, which, if you know what the story is, it's the true story of Cheryl Strayed, and dealing with personal issues. She decided to hike the Pacific Crest Trail, and so and we wanted to shoot as much of that at the actual places where the story takes place. And so this isn't mostly in Oregon, and I think it was like, a couple of weeks before shooting was to begin, the government had one of its famous shutdowns, which, as you may know, shuts down all federal buildings and places, including national parks. And so we needed really last minute to change multiple locations in order to make it work. And so that was an early lesson, where you can't necessarily foresee everything, but it enables you to be able to adjust, in the right manner.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say this other thing I was thinking about, maybe not as much of a challenge as our one kind of major disappointment, in our kind of producing run was we were developing a project with Amy Adams about the life of Janis Joplin, and that sort of went sideways for reasons I won't get into, none of which was our doing or Amy's doing, but more rights related. And so that was a bit of a bummer, but the blessing in disguise on that was that we were very motivated to try to find something to do with Amy. And we were fortunate enough to come on to Sharp Objects, that adaptation of Gillian Flynn's beautiful novel. And, made this 8-hour series for HBO.
That's a hell of a blessing in disguise there.
Yeah.
So you're constantly dealing with all these challenges, and you even taken another more entrepreneurial step in your career with, I know you partnered with John Mark again for your production house, Crazy Rose. So where did that idea come about? When did you know that you wanted to start your own company out of this?
We necessarily didn't. A lot of writers, directors and producers and actors form production companies. And if you're successful, sometimes you're either approached, or your lawyer or reps set you up with deals, and the bigger high-end TV showrunner deals. You might, if you follow the entertainment industry, these 9 or 10 figure deals that Netflix and Amazon and Apple, that you see formulated. But during the first season of Big Little Lies, we were approached by a guy named Graham Taylor, who's a wizard and guru in the film finance world, and he's at a company called Endeavor Content, which is a sister company to WME, William Morris. And we didn't have a strong relationship with, but one day approached us again during Big Little Lies. So we were busy shooting that, but the idea that the theory or proposal he wanted to put forth to us was the idea of starting our own company, kind of more controlling our own destiny in terms of creative decisions and approvals, and better economics and more ownership. And we were at the place where we had already had some film success, and we were getting into, the premium cable high-end TV space with BLL, and that was before the massive success that the show ended up having.
Yeah.
So we were prescient enough to kind of go down that road and started meeting with high equity, high net worth folks, and eventually made our deal directly with Endeavor Content.
So you finally decide to start a podcast. Congrats! You've never been more excited. But wait a sec. You quickly find out this is way more of a time commitment than you initially thought. You're going to need someone that has you covered behind the scenes. That's where I come in. Email me at max@hippodirect.com and let's get wild. So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's get to a segment on inspiration and creativity. So here, think about how you stay creative, how you stay inspired, how I know you use the term artist loosely, but you are definitely an artist. So first thing here is, how do you decide what is going to be your next project? Because you kind of mentioned earlier you have a knack for that and there's a gut feeling that comes with it, but you can't do everything. You have to be selective. So what do you think it is that really jumps out about something when you say, ooh, I got to do this. We have to do this?
The quick answer is something that really moves us, and we have a visceral emotional reaction to, and that could be something that, it could be any emotion really, but something that moves us. And Jean-Marc, maybe he'd be mad if I said it, but he'll read something, and if it affects him, he'll cry during the read. I can't say that I have.
Oh wow.
So I know what he means. It doesn't necessarily happen on my end, but for us, it's just, I always just have to be out there watching everything, reading everything. I go to a ton of concerts and listen to a lot of music, and even if we're working in a different medium, I think, they all kind of blend in. And, I love art, and I just try to stay creative. I play guitar and piano, and so you want to read a lot, and it's not just screenplays and books, but it's articles. There's a New York Times piece, and it's basically in a one-liner. It's the Holocaust love story. And I was so deeply moved. I reached out to another producer that we're working on the John and Yoko project, and I said, "Hey, is this something we should go after?" And he agreed. And so, this is like that, that kind of Holocaust genre is hollowed ground, and also has been really exploited, by the greatest filmmakers, whether it's Spielberg or Polanski. And I, as reticent as I would be to tackle that subject matter, this story is so different and unique and beautiful and emotional, and really compelling, that I think maybe that's one worth going after. And who knows if we'll end up getting it or not, because it'll probably be a competitive situation. But in the meantime, so that's probably the last really emotional thing I saw. So it's, New York Times, I can't remember their names, but it was a story of these teens who had an affair. I think it was at Birkenau, and then got split up and went off and lived their lives, and they both escaped. And 75 years later, something like that, they met up again. And she had passed, and he's in his 90s, and it's just, it's really something else. Yeah. But you never know when you're going to be touched emotionally, and that's kind of how we try to we go to our projects organically. There really isn't necessarily a 5-year plan or a 3-year plan or 10-year plan. It kind of has evolved just naturally, and scheduling of actors and their windows and our windows, they need to line up, and align. And we use this phrase, it's in the stars, meaning sometimes you can't control things. And if the stars align, we can, it'll work out. For instance, we had signed on to do Demolition before we did Wild, but then some circumstances that I won't even recall precluded Demolition from going before that. And same thing with Big Little Lies and Sharp Objects. We had committed to doing Sharp Objects first, but the way things lined up with BLL and maybe it was actors or a release date from HBO, we ended up doing BLL first, which caused Jean-Marc, my partner, to have to direct, these 15 hours of high-end TV back to back, which is, sort of a
Oh my
Guinness
God.
World record. But anyway,
Yeah, he probably didn't sleep for half a year
yeah,
there.
yeah, but he went on a nice break now, and so I think he's fully recharged. But the
That's good.
idea is that having a loose plan is, something I would probably suggest. But if there's, if you've got something you're tackling, and then something could usurp it because it moved you or because it's moving fast, then you just got to make decisions and adjust. But we try to stay loyal to our kind of plan, or our game plan, and it's served us well. We try, if we say we're committing to do something, we try to stick to our guns and commit to it.
And how often do you think you go out and seek new projects and then get in contact with people to say, hey, we want to do this, versus somebody sends
Uh-huh.
something to you and it comes the other way?
That's a good question. So
Thank you.
when you're an agent, you're out there selling, and unless you are fortunate to develop a client and an artist that becomes so successful, then you get what we call the incoming business, I suppose. And so on the producer side of things, you also have to be entrepreneurial. And like I said, if you read a New York Times article and you want it, you're not going to be the only person probably who wants it. So you really have to have a hungry entrepreneurial spirit in order to lock down material or advance things. We've been fortunate enough. It's a little bit of both. So occasionally I'll read something or hear about something and go after it. I'll give you a good example. It hasn't been announced yet, so I'm reticent to say what it is. But
We can talk later if you want to keep it in or not.
yeah, but there's a book that I read. I won't say what it is for the moment, but I'll say that Stephen King wrote the review of the book, and I also had read that in the New York Times. And I guess for anyone, if there's any takeaway, it's that you get a lot of good material info from the New York Times if you
Yeah,
read it every
clearly.
morning. But I had read a review for this book that sounded really interesting. We tracked it down. It turned out that William Morris, their book department, controlled the book. We teamed up with another British company to secure the premium cable, I guess, streaming world rights to that book. And we've since attached an A+ actress to it, a very talented Oscar-winning actress, and now we're waiting to hear from a high-level director who made a film this year that we absolutely fell in love with. So that's the proactive producing kind of entrepreneurial model. Then on the other side of the coin, when you reach a certain level in your career, hopefully knock on wood, you get a lot of incoming submissions. So you end up turning into Dr. No, which is a little nickname for someone who turns, everything down. And,
Yeah.
and you hear pitches and you get scripts and you get treatments and you get books submitted and you get formats sent your way. And that's an enviable place to be in. And we're fortunate to be there. And so we kind of get a lot of good material, but it has to be exemplary to say like, hey, we'll make this one of our 7 or 5 or whatever the number is that we're willing to develop, because, and if it's something my partner's going to direct, he is a screenwriter, a director, a producer, and an award-winning editor, and he started in editing. So unlike a lot of filmmakers, he's on the project from beginning to end. He's a super talented writer. He writes on everything that we've ever made, and on his French language stuff, he was, I think, the sole writer on it. So on John and Yoko, for instance, he's co-writing it with, an award-winning screenwriter.
Yeah.
And so when he commits to something, he's on it from beginning to end and can't just, leave the project. So when he commits to something, it's a year and a half or something like that. So we pick those projects religiously, selectively. On the things that we're getting into now, that I had mentioned earlier with our company, Crazy Rose, it can be docs, film, TV, and we're trying to foster either newer filmmakers or established filmmakers who we are motivated and enamored with, and make things that Jean-Marc wouldn't be involved primarily as the creative force, but maybe secondarily in terms of giving thoughts on script or cuts and that sort of thing. So with that, we have a little bit bigger breadth and scope to our business. But even then, we're not going to be like, and this is nothing against Imagine. I'm,
Hmm.
I'm super impressed with obviously everything that they do in all walks, but we're maybe just a little bit smaller scope in terms of the projects that we're going to tackle and take on. And so we're just, try a little more boutique-y, I guess, in that respect. So, so the bottom line is very picky, and you never know what you're, when you're staring at something super beautiful in its face. So that's, yeah.
I think that's a great applicable message for anybody, no matter what you're doing. If you're creating something, just always keep your eyes open, because you never know where you can find something that might be a wonderful fit and turn into this beautiful thing. And for you, clearly New York Times has a knack for finding things that you're interested in. We'll make sure to share the link in the show notes to that article. But you just never know where you're going to find inspiration. So it's neat that you guys, you're not doing this for hobby. Like, these are your careers, and you're literally always just keeping eyes open all around for things like this. Let's get to a fan favorite segment called the Wild Business Shout Out of the Week. The Wild Business Shout Out of the Week.
Nice.
Thank you. Wild Business Shout Out of the Week. This is where we talk about an ad or campaign or trend that caught our attention and chat about it for a little bit. So for you, this is something I was really wondering about. So really curious to hear your thoughts about. But, at the time of this recording, there's a really, really interesting dynamic in the providers in the entertainment industry. So, you've got movies, you have traditional TV, you have all the OTT streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, and Disney Plus came out recently as well. So there's a whole different dynamic there, and consumers are rapidly changing their behavior and how they consume stuff. Can you talk about that for a little bit and the impact you're seeing?
I'd say it's the closest version of the Wild West in the industry, and and the success of Netflix as the primary disruptor, and since I guess the DVD has really helped or hindered the evolving of the industry, and more helped, I guess, than hindered. But the point of it is, from a business standpoint, this kind of content proliferation from the major media markets has provided just an obscene amount of opportunity and ability to sell things and to program. And that's why all as consumers, all of our heads are spinning, because we don't know what to watch, and there's so much out there. And you've got, battles of the more traditional film exhibitors and their theaters, and the Comcasts and DirecTV and what they have going on. But, it depends on what perspective you want to look at it. But from our kind of filmmaking and producing point of view, it's exciting. We're movie people to its core. And when we started making these high-end, limited or drama series that, we have with Big Little Lies, Sharp Objects, and after John and Yoko, we're going to go back to HBO and make a beautiful, I think, 7-hour limited series based on an adaptation of this beautiful memoir called Gorilla and the Bird. And it deals with mental illness and the U.S. healthcare system in an artful way, and deals with, a story of a guy living in New York and who has a serious psychiatric break and is diagnosed with severe bipolar schizophrenia. And we tell his story and the relationship with his mother. And the book's great, and I highly recommend it. And it was a New York Times bestseller and this and that. But
of course, New York Times.
Yeah.
No, just bestseller.
But suffice it to say, we're in this world where now you've got other buyers to sell to, but at the same time, it's led to the detraction of movie studios, right? And so, and the movie business as a whole, and that's why if there are movie stars who 5 years ago would be like, I'd never work, in cable, and now
Right.
now you see it, and there'll be some holdouts, but maybe it's a matter of time until the right material presents itself. And so, primarily because of Netflix, and then followed by Amazon, and now Apple, and the Warner Media one, which is called HBO Max.
Yeah, which is named after me, by the way.
That's good. And we work with HBO, so that
I'm sure it's official.
We'll work with the two of you. And
perfect. All right, sign me up.
and then Disney Plus. I haven't even had a chance to explore Disney Plus really as a whole, and it's an exciting time. And I just we just call it the Wild West, I guess. But as a whole, it has its pros and cons, and it's sort of like what happened. I equate it, I guess, a little bit to paper media and what happened to magazines and newspapers, right? And so
Yeah.
those companies, before they saw, the end is near, if you didn't invest in the internet, then you're either evolving or going away, and it's the battle of the fittest in that regard. And so I feel like the studios like Warner is a good example, who have a strong film business with Warner Brothers and with New Line, who are owned by AT&T, who own DirecTV. Then we're smart enough to spin out this HBO Max situation where they have a lot of their titles. They have all of HBO stuff, and they have Friends and I think Seinfeld and the rest, and they're having original programming, and we'll end up selling something to them, I have a feeling, as well. And so from our standpoint, we want to be in the business with all these companies, as a whole. We have a great loyalty to HBO, where we've built a strong relationship with. And at the same time, on the movie side, there's still, Fox was eaten up by Disney. It's just the kind of cannibalization of the industry, coupled with this SVOD OTT world that we now live in, where it's easier to watch Irishman on the couch, or Marriage Story on the couch, as opposed to going to a theater. That we could talk about that till we're blue in the face, but
right.
So yeah, that to me is an interesting time in terms of how they're marketed. Many millions of dollars are going to get your eyeballs and your wallets in terms of what you want to spend your money on and your time with. And so if you have a family, Disney Plus makes a ton of sense. And but even if you're a fanboy of Star Wars and Marvel, they're a very appealing possibility, and choice as well. So it's an interesting time. I think it'll evolve the way it's going to, and you just want to be on the right side of it.
Definitely. Yeah. I think it's important to be in all those things. I like your analogy of the wild, wild west, because it truly feels like it. Just in your, exposure to it over the past decade or so, have you seen, and obviously you don't need to name anybody, but have you seen any sort of shift or changing mindset in terms of actresses and actors, in terms of what sort of thing they want to be featured in, like whether it's film or, limited series on TV or streaming services? Is there any notable shifts in that you've seen?
More, like I said earlier, more actors are shifting towards premium cable than maybe you would have necessarily thought. And I think it's because you go to where the material, as an actor, you're, part of your DNA is work with the right director and find the right material. And so if, in light of what we talked about earlier, if the material and the filmmakers are starting to gravitate toward premium cable, for instance, or the streaming world, actors will follow. Maybe not all, but like I said, 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, you wouldn't have expected that Oscar-winning actors or actresses would be working in HBO. Not to say that none have, but not now. Nothing surprises you in that regard. And so, especially
Totally.
again, HBO and Netflix and Amazon, you have it's more like who's not doing it almost at this point. And so and it's good for the marketplace, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, very healthy. So let's wrap up with some rapid fire Q&A. You ready for it?
I'm a little slow, but let's give it a shot.
Sorry, what was it? No, I'm just kidding. So, all right, let's get wild. I'm sure you'll be great. Take as much time as you want with the responses. What was your favorite movie as a child?
I'd say a tie between Empire Strikes Back and Rocky 2.
Oh, those are some literally heavy hitters there. Who were you the most starstruck by?
I don't suffer from that affliction in general, thankfully, but one time I went out of my way to meet Clint Eastwood, and I'd say that's the closest I've felt to be starstruck. It was at the premiere of that Angelina Jolie film, whose name I cannot remember, but and we had a nice minute conversation, but I'd say close to that.
Yeah, that's not too shabby. And you've been to plenty of award shows. I mean, your works have won Emmys and Academy Awards.
Yeah.
What's your favorite memory from one of the award shows?
I'd say I took my mom to the 2013 Academy Awards, and early in the broadcast was Best Supporting Actor. And when Jared Leto won the Oscar for that, which wasn't a given. So when in these kinds of situations where maybe there's a comfort level or I'm kind of a handicapper maybe from betting on college football and basketball
Yeah.
back in the day, right? And I like to put percentages on things or likelihood. And but when he won that, there was kind of just this spontaneous, exuberant joy, for lack of a better word, that took our little area, where we were all sitting. And we had a feeling it would be a really good night. And we won 2 more that night for a movie that was $5.5 million budget that we shot in 25 days, and got
Oh my God.
3 Oscars. That was probably maybe the most fun of a night that we had. And I guess on the TV side of things, when Big Little Lies had their big haul, and both at the Globes and the Emmys, and we were able to win those, that, get your little statue and walk around with the rest of the night. It's a pretty exciting feeling.
Yeah, I have to imagine that is a pretty good feeling. So that's pretty cool. And last question, what's your biggest pet peeve?
I have so many, and the fact that I'm not coming up with one right spontaneously.
Paralysis by choice.
No, but maybe lack of modesty. That's people who are full of themselves. I was on a conference call and someone was speaking to me in a very professorial sort of way, and there were 5 other people on the call, so it wasn't like a one-on-one call, and I just decided to hang up on the call. and which is kind of that's kind of a faux pas on a conference call, but I just couldn't listen to the person anymore. And so I think it's kind of funny, and maybe it's a little rude, but I had had enough. And when I was asked about it, you dropped off and everyone said goodbye, and I just told my partner on it that I just couldn't listen to that person anymore. So
I think they deserved it. They walked into it. So
right.
All right. So thank you, Nathan. This has been amazing. Well, first and foremost, thank you for not dropping off on this call suspiciously. So that's a big one there. But thank you for sharing your story and your background. This is super fascinating, and really, really enjoyed the parallels between the entertainment and creative side of things as well as the business world. So thanks for coming on. And and I'm not sure how public you want to be about stuff, but where's the best place for people to connect with you?
I have my work email's fine. It's Nathan, Nathan at Crazy Rose, CrazyRose films with an S.com.
Perfect. Awesome. And last thing here, final thoughts. Stage is yours. It could be anything you want. It could be a line or a quote. Send us off here.
I would just say thanks for having me, Max, and I appreciate it. And for all those listening out there, just trust your instincts. And one other little piece of advice that I've found: some of the decisions you don't make or you say no to, it could be as important as the ones that you say yes to. So don't ever feel pressured if your gut's telling you not to do something or not to undertake something. So that served me well, I guess, in my time so far.
And my gut is telling me to say thank you, Nathan and Crazy Rose. And thank you, wild listeners, for tuning into another episode. If you'd like to hear more wild stories like these, make sure to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite app and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. You can also soak up our marketing and business growth resources and more at hippodirect.com/blog and hippodirect.com/newsletter. That newsletter is the Hippo Digest, and it's your place for wild marketing ideas every single week. And of course, come connect and say hey on your favorite social media platforms at the handles Hippo Direct and Max Branstetter. Until next time, let your business run wild.
Bring on the bongos!